everyone, and welcome to blog 68 of Tackle the Feelings Before the Behavior. My name's Paula, and it's been a while since I put a video up on this channel, but everything has been up there since I started, and if you're looking for parenting things and all of that, please do take a look at my channel. I'm going to start making a few more videos on emotional concepts, things that are in our everyday life. And the first sort of concept I wanted to talk about was denial. Most people know what denial is. It's quite a frustrating thing if you're on the receiving end of somebody's denial, where someone is not seeing something. Even if it's staring them in the face, they refuse to see that that's happening. For a big example is a parent refusing to see that the other parent is sexually abusing their child, or you refusing to acknowledge that something's happening in your work environment, in your home environment, and you just can't do it. You can't hear what somebody's saying. You can't accept something that differs from your belief, from the way you've made sense of something in your mind. And this happens to us all. It's not something that's stupid people are in denial and people who have an intelligence and common sense are not in denial. It's nothing like that. Even with all my studies and everything on this topic, I find myself in denial sometimes if I'm not ready. And the truth of the matter is, denial is about readiness. It is about where you're at in your journey, and everybody's at different levels in different areas. So we're not excelling in every single area, or not excelling, or halfway through. In some areas in our life we do really, really well. In others we're a little bit delayed. Most of the areas we sit somewhere in the average realm. But in a lot of our emotional perceptions and our emotional awareness and intelligence, denial can really come in and make it very difficult for us to all live with one another and progress and change, because denial does not want to accept change. So we're seeing it a lot in the world. That's why I wanted to speak about it today. And so when I have clients, I often talk about onion layers, like, well, how healing is like in onion layers. Like, you have a core and it goes round in circles all the way around, and it builds and it builds and it builds with like you've thrown a rock into the water and it has all these ripples. That's kind of how we are. A lot of the time we have core wounding, which often happens in our childhood or from an actual incident. And then if it isn't processed, if it stays as trauma, which means it hasn't been processed and integrated yet, it's a bit of a wound. And so we develop coping mechanisms and strategies, and we build up layers around this wound. And our healing is almost like a process of unpacking. And that outer layer, before you've even entered into the onion, is what I call denial. It's when you're not seeing the journey yet. And it's a very difficult place to be. And if someone's quite far into their healing journey and they've gone through triggers and trauma, and they've worked through some big issues, and they've gone to therapy, and they've done other processes, and they've really worked on themselves, it's really difficult to be close with someone who's in denial, who doesn't see things the way that you see things, who doesn't have insight into why things are doing. They don't see the complexities of where people are at, of where situations are at, of why we can't just fix a situation, why we can't just fix a person. And it's really difficult to try and get somebody who's in denial to be able to see what you're seeing. And if you try and force somebody in denial, you can harm them a little bit emotionally and mentally, because they're not ready to see. They don't have. And so when I talk of the onion layers, as we keep going down and getting further and further to our core of who we are and what we feel and our issues, it's like a video game where you go through the layers and the levels, and each level has its own armor and its own tools and weapons and whatever you need and perspectives to be able to tackle whatever happens in your layer. If you try go into a layer that you haven't worked for yet, if if you haven't gone through some things first before you get to another layer, which is what happens when people are in denial, then you're going to not have the tools, the thinking ability, the armor, so to speak, to be able to hold that concept. It's going to feel very threatening. It's going to throw things, all the meaning you've made, you're going to feel very lost. You're going to feel very discombobulated, is the word I love. You're going to feel all over the place, and life is going to feel very threatening and unsafe. And what do we get? Anxiety. And so it's not going to feel right. That perspective doesn't mean it isn't right. It just means if you are not ready to see something, it's not going to feel right until you are. And so herein lies the problem in our world, in our relationships, in everything. We really need to look at ourselves and where we are at and take responsibility for who we are trying to reach, who are we hanging out with, who are we working with, who are we trying to collaborate with and interact with. Are we thinking that there's something dreadfully wrong with us because somebody can't see it? They can't change. Do we abuse people and force people and beat them over the head with truth if they can't see it? Will they see it if we do that? No. They're going to get coping mechanisms to block it because it's threatening. The anxiety is going to kick in and it's going to put up a big wall. So what needs to happen first is an acknowledgement that you might not be seeing what you're seeing. And that doesn't just come. It doesn't come from somebody else telling you. It comes from experiencing. It comes from growing. It comes from things just slapping you in the face so many times that you've got no choice but to see it. And that's what a lot of things in our world have forced us to do. A lot of people have not been ready for the changes. They don't want to see the poverty and the hardship and the underbellies with crime, sexual abuse, gender-based violence, substance abuse, mental illness, atrocities, psychopaths, all that kind of thing. They don't want to see it in their world. And because nobody is willing to see things, things can get really bad on that underbelly. Corruption happens. People get away with a lot. And it's a very difficult and tricky time we are in, working with denial, working in mental health with denial. It's not me, it's everybody else. We're in a very blame-filled, narcissistic, sort of way of being, out of our survival, out of our anxiety. We don't want to take anything more that's going to throw our world into upheaval, new perspectives, when we are struggling to find grounding where we are at. And so I think the message today is to understand that. Understand where people are at and understand your limitations in the types of people you can be around for how long and what you need to do to make sure you are feeling seen, heard, and understood in a world full of denial. And if you have messages that you need to get out, if you need to say things, if you need people to hear things, if you've got a message, you've got insights and you want to get your voice heard, it's the time to think outside of the box. It's a time to think about how do we make things more palatable for people to hear. Do we need stepping stones to be able to prepare people for knowledge? And I think that on a broader scale is very important. People who are in leadership positions and all that, we need to be thinking outside of the box. Healers, teachers, community leaders. We all need to be adapting and looking at ourselves and how are we communicating and how much are we getting frustrated and what do we need to do to take ourselves out of this frustrating energy. So it's not an easy one, and we're all going to face up against denial in ourselves and in others quite a bit as the world changes. And so I thought I wanted to try and explain that. To explain it, I hope I've made sense a little bit, just get the cogs turning. Denial is something that we need to make room for, but also hold space for. There are going to be a lot of people thrown into absolute unknowns and absolute anxiety, from having their beliefs and worldviews and everything shattered at the moment. So as always, be kind and gentle with yourself first and then with others. Have a great day. Bye.